Jason Whitaker, 35, was the kind of man who earned respect without trying. A mechanic by trade, Jason ran a modest but trusted auto repair shop on Route 84. His hands were always stained with grease. His shirts faded from years in the Texas sun, and he preferred country radio over small talk. Friends and customers often described him as dependable, quiet, and hardworking. If he had a flaw, it was perhaps that he didn't talk much, kept his emotions tucked away like loose bolts in a drawer. His wife, Kendra Whitaker, 29, was the town beauty in her younger days. Brown hair always curled just right, a magnetic smile that lit up rooms, and a flirtatious streak that never quite left her. After marrying Jason at 21, she left her job at the Dairy Queen to raise their daughter, Lily, and keep their home in order. From the outside, Kendra seemed content, hosting BBQs, helping with school bake sales, and posting filtered family photos on Facebook with captions like, "Blessed beyond measure." They lived in a modest 3-bedroom home on the edge of farmland. No frills, but enough room for Lily to run barefoot in the backyard, for Jason to work on his classic truck projects in the garage, and for Kendra to host her sisters for weekend wine nights. To those who knew them, Jason and Kendra were ordinary, unremarkable, safe. But inside those walls, something was shifting. Kendra had grown restless over the past year. She complained about Jason working too much, about how predictable life had become. She'd started dressing differently. Tighter jeans, more makeup, longer nights scrolling through her phone. Jason noticed but said nothing. He trusted her. He always had. They had been trying, half-heartedly, to have a second child for almost 2 years. But the timing never seemed right. Their marriage, while not broken, had grown quiet, complacent, familiar. Then came Ethan Cross. Kendra's half-brother from her mother's second marriage. Ethan had always been the black sheep of the family. At just 20, he had dropped out of college in Houston and drifted through a series of low-paying jobs, couch surfing, and chasing parties. When their mother kicked him out for good after a heated fight, Kendra convinced Jason to let him stay with them for a few months, just until he gets on his feet. Jason hesitated. He didn't know Ethan well, and what he did know didn't impress him. But Kendra insisted. Family, she said, helps family. So in the spring of 2023, Ethan moved into their guest room with 2 duffel bags, a beat-up Xbox, and a devil-may-care smirk that made Jason uneasy from the start. No one could have known it then, but that decision, welcoming Ethan into their home, was the first crack in the foundation. A single moment of kindness that would spiral into betrayal, obsession, and ultimately murder. The day Ethan Cross arrived in Lubbock was forgettable by most standards, hot, dry, and quiet. But for Jason Whitaker, it marked the beginning of a slow, unseen descent into chaos. Jason watched from the front porch as a dusty silver sedan pulled into the driveway. Ethan stepped out wearing oversized sunglasses, ripped jeans, and a hoodie despite the Texas heat. His duffel bags were carelessly thrown in the back seat, and his phone barely left his hand as he nodded casually toward Jason. "Hey man," Ethan said, as if they were old friends. "Appreciate you letting me crash here." Jason gave a half nod in return. "Just until you get back on your feet. That's the deal." Ethan smirked. "Yeah, I got it." Kendra came out of the house like a wave of sunshine, arms open, embracing her half-brother tightly. "You look so skinny. Are you even eating?" Jason noticed how long they hugged. Inside, Ethan was given the guest room, a small space with a twin bed, a dresser, and a window overlooking the backyard. Kendra had cleaned it out and laid fresh sheets, even added a small welcome basket with snacks and toiletries. Jason said nothing, but the gesture didn't sit right with him. Over the next few days, Ethan settled in as if he'd always belonged. He slept late, played video games into the early morning hours, and rarely helped around the house. Jason came home from long hours at the shop to find Ethan on the couch, feet up, laughing at something on his phone. Still, Kendra defended him. "He's just going through a tough time," she'd say. "He needs support, not judgment." Jason wanted to argue. He wanted to say that Ethan was a grown man and needed to act like one. But instead, he bit his tongue. What struck Jason the most wasn't just Ethan's laziness. It was how quickly he and Kendra slipped into an easy, overly familiar rhythm. They laughed at inside jokes Jason didn't understand, whispered during dinner, and exchanged glances that felt different. At first, Jason told himself he was being paranoid. They were siblings, after all. Maybe it was just the awkward adjustment of having another adult in the house. But the tension grew. One evening, Jason walked into the living room to find Ethan massaging Kendra's shoulders. She was sitting on the floor between his legs, eyes closed, giggling at something he whispered in her ear. They both jumped when they noticed Jason in the doorway. Kendra stood up quickly. "My neck's been killing me all day," she explained, her tone too cheerful. "Ethan's got magic fingers." Jason forced a smile and walked straight to the kitchen. That night, he stayed up late, staring at the ceiling, wondering why he felt like a stranger in his own home. Over the next few weeks, the subtle boundaries between Kendra and Ethan began to erode further. Jason would return from work and hear them laughing behind closed doors. He once found a wine glass in Ethan's room, Kendra's lipstick smeared on the rim. When Jason confronted her, she brushed it off. He asked if we could have a drink together. "He's lonely, Jace. Don't be so uptight." Jason didn't say what he really wanted to. Why are you drinking with him in his bedroom? He didn't want to seem jealous. He didn't want to seem insecure. And most of all, he didn't want to believe that anything could be happening between his wife and her own half-brother. But the signs were stacking up. There was the time Ethan, accidentally, walked into the bathroom while Kendra was in the shower. The night Jason found them sitting in the dark backyard, talking in hushed voices beneath the stars. Ethan shirtless, Kendra wrapped in a blanket, the air between them heavy. And there were whispers in town too. At the cafe where Kendra picked up a few shifts a week, a coworker told Jason's sister that Kendra had been really close with Ethan lately. Too close. Still, Jason said nothing. He buried himself in his work, spent longer hours at the garage, and avoided the house as much as possible. But deep down, he knew. He could feel it like oil seeping through a cracked engine. Silent, slow, and corrosive. One night, unable to sleep, Jason walked into the garage and sat in the dark cab of his old Ford pickup. He lit a cigarette, something he hadn't done in years, and stared at the worn dashboard. In that moment, he admitted something to himself he hadn't dared say aloud. He didn't trust his wife anymore, and he no longer saw Ethan as family. He saw him as a threat. What Jason didn't know, what he couldn't yet see, was that the betrayal had already taken root. It was growing like mold behind the walls, hidden from view. And soon it would explode into something deadly. The shift in the Whitaker household wasn't immediate. It came in fragments, small, seemingly insignificant changes that, when viewed in isolation, didn't raise alarms. But together, they painted a picture of something far more sinister. Jason began noticing how Kendra had changed, subtly but unmistakably. She was dressing differently. Shorter skirts, tighter tops. She wore perfume more often, even on days she stayed home. Her makeup, once reserved for date nights or church, became an everyday routine. Jason tried to compliment her at first, but her reactions were dismissive, distant, as if his words no longer mattered. And Ethan, he noticed everything. Jason saw how his eyes followed Kendra when she left a room, how he laughed too loud at her jokes, how he touched her back lightly when passing behind her. Always quick, always casual. But Jason wasn't imagining it. The energy in the house had changed. Kendra and Ethan had developed their own private world, full of shared glances, subtle giggles, and inside jokes Jason no longer understood. They cooked together in the evenings, playful and teasing, while Jason sat on the porch nursing a beer, staring into the darkness, trying to quiet the storm inside his chest. One night, he heard Ethan in the kitchen late, well past midnight. Jason stepped out of the bedroom and found Ethan shirtless, eating straight from the fridge. There was no guilt in his posture, no apology in his tone. "What's up, man?" Ethan said casually, spooning peanut butter from the jar. "Can't sleep," Jason muttered. Ethan smirked. "Yeah, me neither." The way he said it sent a cold pulse down Jason's spine. Jason's mind was a battleground of suspicion and denial. Was he overreacting? Was this all just in his head? Or was something truly happening under his own roof? The real fracture came 2 weeks later, when Jason came home early from work. A broken lift at the shop had forced them to close for the day. He entered the house through the back door, expecting to find Kendra cleaning or watching TV. Instead, he heard laughter, soft, intimate, from the hallway. He paused near the guest room door, which was cracked slightly open. Inside, he saw Kendra sitting on the edge of Ethan's bed, her hand on his thigh. They were laughing about something on his phone, but it was the way she looked at him that stopped Jason's heart. It wasn't sisterly. It wasn't innocent. She looked at him like she used to look at Jason, before the distance, before the suspicion, before Ethan. Jason stood frozen, heart pounding. Then, like a ghost, he backed away silently and exited the house the same way he'd come in. He drove around for hours that night, aimless and numb. That was the moment he knew. The following morning, Jason confronted Kendra over breakfast. "You spend a lot of time with Ethan," he said without looking up from his coffee. Kendra didn't flinch. "He's my brother, Jason." "What's that supposed to mean?" Jason finally met her eyes. "It means I know something's going on." She set her fork down carefully. "You sound paranoid." Jason pushed his chair back slowly. "Maybe I am, but I'm not stupid." Kendra stood up, cleared her plate, and said nothing more. That night, Jason installed a small audio recorder under the guest room bed. He hated himself for doing it, but he had to know. He couldn't trust his eyes anymore, but maybe he could trust his ears. 3 nights later, Jason played the recording in the garage. What he heard shattered the last of his doubts. Kendra's voice, Ethan's laugh, whispers, moans, the sound of betrayal. It wasn't just emotional anymore, it was physical. It had been happening for weeks, maybe longer. Jason sat in his truck afterward, gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. A wave of rage passed through him, pure, violent, and uncontrollable. His wife, his home, violated by someone he had taken in, fed, sheltered, by someone who was supposed to be family. But Jason didn't scream. He didn't punch a wall. Instead, he began to plan. Jason Whitaker didn't sleep the night he listened to the recording. He sat in the cold garage until morning, the darkness pressing down on him like a weight. His fingers trembled as he replayed the audio. Kendra's breathless moans, Ethan's deep murmurs, their laughter afterward, over and over. Each time, a new piece of him cracked. By the time the sun rose over the Lubbock sky, Jason was no longer the same man who had once built a home around love and loyalty. Something inside had changed permanently. He wasn't just angry. He was humiliated, betrayed, broken. And more than anything, he wanted to make them feel what he felt. He returned inside quietly, his face expressionless. Kendra was already up, making coffee, her robe loosely tied around her. She smiled, unaware of the storm behind his eyes. "Morning, babe." Jason said nothing. "Rough night?" she asked, sipping her coffee. He nodded once, eyes cold. "Yeah, you could say that." Kendra looked confused for a second, but Jason turned and walked away before she could ask more. His silence had become his shield. Behind it, he was calculating, watching, waiting. Over the next few days, Jason played the role of the calm, quiet husband. But beneath the surface, he was unraveling. The tension in the house was suffocating. Every time Ethan walked by, Jason felt his jaw tighten. Every time Kendra touched her phone or laughed at a text, Jason wondered if it was Ethan she was smiling at. Ethan, for his part, had grown bolder. He strutted around the house shirtless more often, sat too close to Kendra on the couch, and once even joked about how Jason was lucky to have her. Jason responded with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. The charade continued, day after day. But the pressure was mounting, and Jason knew it couldn't last much longer. He began tracking their movements, mentally noting when Kendra and Ethan were alone, when they disappeared together, when he would return home to find the back door mysteriously locked. One Saturday night, Jason pretended to leave for the shop. He got in his truck, drove 2 blocks, then doubled back on foot and crept up to the house through the side yard. The bedroom window was cracked open. He heard them, together. The confirmation burned like acid. Jason didn't move. He stood under that window for nearly 10 minutes, listening, letting it all sink in. The love he thought he had, the future he had built, the vows they made, it was all a lie, a performance. When the sound stopped and the light clicked off, Jason finally turned away. But something inside him had snapped. He didn't cry. He didn't scream. He began to plan revenge. The idea came to Jason the next day as he stood in his workshop, staring at his toolbox. He had a license for a rifle, one he used for hunting trips with friends, now collecting dust in the closet. He also owned a Glock, registered, tucked safely in a lockbox under his bed. He could do it easily. One pull of the trigger and all the pain would end. But Jason wasn't impulsive. He wanted them to suffer. Not just physically, but emotionally, mentally. He wanted Kendra to regret ever looking at Ethan that way. He wanted Ethan to see death coming and know exactly why. Jason went as far as cleaning the gun that night, disassembling and reassembling it with a mechanical precision that surprised even him. It wasn't rage guiding his hands now. It was resolve. But something held him back. The faces of his parents flashed in his mind. The photo of his wedding day. The child he and Kendra had once hoped to have. "Don't do it," a voice whispered. "But what else is left?" Another answered. The tipping point came days later. Jason returned from work early again. This time he entered the house from the front. Quietly, slowly. He didn't expect anything. He wasn't trying to catch them. He only wanted to grab his truck keys and head to the feed store. But when he opened the door, he heard movement upstairs. Light footsteps, then whispering, then a soft thud, like someone had dropped something. Jason climbed the stairs slowly, each step heavier than the last. The guest room door was shut, but not locked. He pushed it open. There they were. Kendra, on the bed, Ethan between her legs, her robe half open, her eyes wide in horror as Jason stood in the doorway, face blank. Ethan scrambled up, shirtless, stammering, "It's not what it looks like, man." Jason didn't flinch. Kendra gasped, "Jason, But he turned and walked away. No shouting, no punching, no words, just silence. That silence was more terrifying than any explosion. That night, Jason slept in the garage. He didn't speak to either of them the next morning. Didn't acknowledge them. He packed a small bag, grabbed his keys and drove off. But he wasn't leaving for good. He was giving them time. To wonder. To panic. To think they'd gotten away with it. Jason knew what came next. And the plan, his final plan, was already in motion. Jason didn't go far. He checked into a modest roadside motel just 15 minutes outside of town, where the front desk clerk didn't ask questions. He brought only a duffel bag, essentials, his Glock, and a journal he hadn't opened in years. The plan was no longer an idea. It had transformed into something inevitable. He told no one where he was. Not his coworkers, not his parents, not even his best friend from high school, who had once stood beside him as his best man. He sat in that motel room for 3 nights, replaying the betrayal in his mind like a film stuck on a loop. Kendra's breathless voice, Ethan's bare back. The moment they looked up and realized they were caught. That image had branded itself behind Jason's eyelids. He couldn't eat. He barely slept. His phone buzzed constantly the first day. Missed calls from Kendra. A few from Ethan. Texts that read, "Jason, please call me. We need to talk. Don't do anything stupid." He read them all. Replied to none. By the second day, the calls stopped. And by the third, silence returned, cold and familiar. Jason knew there had to be meaning in how things would end. He couldn't just snap. There needed to be clarity. A reckoning. So he sat at the desk in the motel room and began writing. He wrote a letter addressed to Detective Marla Coe, the most well-known homicide detective in Lubbock. Jason had never met her, but he'd seen her on the news a few times and respected her work. The letter was 4 pages long, equal parts confession, justification, and final thoughts. In it, Jason explained everything. The betrayal, the evidence, the humiliation, the rage, and most of all, the moment he saw Ethan with Kendra, the moment that ended his life as he knew it. He concluded the letter with a single line. This isn't about murder. This is about justice the world refuses to give a man until it's too late. He sealed the letter in an envelope, left it on the motel desk, and slid his room key under the manager's office door with a note that read, "Call police, room 17. Urgent." Then he drove home. It was past 9 p.m. when Jason pulled into the driveway. The house lights were off, but he knew they were both inside. Kendra's car was parked in the usual spot. Ethan's beat-up blue pickup was across the street. Jason didn't knock. He let himself in with his keys and locked the door behind him. Silence. The house was as he remembered, every detail a monument to a life that had lied to his face. He walked upstairs with calm purpose, every step deliberate. The Glock was tucked into the back of his waistband. He opened the bedroom door. Kendra sat up quickly. "Jason? Oh my God, you're here." She stopped mid-sentence when she saw the look on his face. Ethan was in the room too, leaning against the dresser, shirtless as always. "Hey man, listen. Let's just talk." Jason didn't raise his voice, didn't lunge. He simply stepped forward and pulled the gun out slowly. Ethan's eyes widened. "Whoa, whoa. Put that down." Kendra screamed, backing against the headboard. "Jason, please. Don't do this. Just talk to me." Jason's voice came low, steady. "You already said everything, Kendra. I heard it. Every moan. Every lie." Ethan tried to move toward him, hands raised. "Jason, I swear. It didn't mean anything. It just happened." Boom. The first shot hit Ethan in the shoulder. He screamed, falling against the dresser, blood splattering the mirror. Kendra shrieked, covering her ears. Jason walked closer. Boom. The second shot landed in Ethan's chest. He gasped once, then slumped down, lifeless. Kendra was sobbing now, crawling toward the corner of the bed. Jason turned toward her. "You made a fool out of me." "I'm sorry, Jason. I'm so sorry," she wailed. "Please, don't kill me." But Jason didn't lift the gun. He stared at her, trembling, 1,000 thoughts crashing through his mind. The wedding vows, the holidays, the baby they lost 2 years ago, the hope, the years he gave her. He dropped the gun on the floor. "I want you to live with this," he said through gritted teeth. "Every single day, you'll remember what you did, and you'll know why he died." Then, Jason walked downstairs, stepped out onto the porch, and waited. When the sirens came, 10 minutes later, he was sitting on the steps, hands on his knees, staring up at the stars. The flashing red and blue lights cast eerie shadows across the front of the quiet suburban home. Police cruisers, an ambulance, and 2 black SUVs crowded the driveway and lawn. Neighbors peeked from behind curtains, some stepping onto their porches in stunned silence. Jason Whitaker sat motionless on the porch steps, hands resting peacefully on his thighs. He didn't resist when the officers approached, didn't speak as they handcuffed him. He only looked up at the sky, at the stars that had once guided cattlemen and dreamers. Now they watched over a murderer. Inside the house, chaos erupted. Kendra was hysterical, wrapped in a blanket, sobbing uncontrollably on the living room couch. A paramedic checked her vitals as detectives stepped around, blood pooling upstairs. Ethan's body lay slumped near the dresser, 2 gunshot wounds in his upper torso, his chest stained in deep crimson. Detective Marla Coe arrived minutes later. She was known in Lubbock for her poise and precision, a no-nonsense woman who had solved more murders than anyone else in her department's history. When she stepped into the Whitaker residence, she already knew this case would be different. One of the responding officers handed her a small sealed envelope. "Left at a motel. Address matches his driver's license. It's addressed to you." Marla raised a brow. "To me?" She opened it quietly and began reading. Her expression hardened with each paragraph. When she reached the end, she folded the letter, placed it in her coat pocket, and turned to the officers in the room. "Get a full forensic sweep of the house. Photograph everything. Bag the gun. She then walked calmly back outside and crouched in front of Jason, who was now seated in the back of the cruiser. You planned this. Jason nodded. You knew we'd be coming? He gave her a flat look. I wrote to you, didn't I? There was a long pause. Then Marla Coe stood and closed the door behind her. News of the murder spread across Lubbock like wildfire. Local mechanic arrested in brother-in-law shooting. Love triangle turns deadly in family home. Husband claims infidelity drove him to kill. Social media was ablaze with speculation. Some people condemned Jason as a monster. Others sympathized, seeing him as a man pushed past his limits. Everyone had an opinion, and none of them mattered more than the one person left alive. Kendra. She refused interviews. She turned off her phone. She stopped leaving the house. Guilt consumed her. The whispers at the grocery store, the stares at the gas station. She couldn't bear them. Friends stopped calling. Her own family urged her to move out of town. But Kendra stayed, locking herself inside the walls where everything fell apart. She often found herself standing outside Ethan's old room, staring at the dark stain still faintly visible on the floorboards. And in her dreams, Jason's words echoed. I want you to live with this. Jason was charged with second-degree murder and aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. His defense attorney entered a plea of guilty, but pushed for leniency based on emotional trauma and betrayal. The letter to Detective Coe became central to the trial. It painted a picture not of a cold-blooded killer, but of a man unraveling in silence, abandoned by trust, broken by love, and ultimately consumed by betrayal. Kendra took the stand reluctantly. She confirmed the affair, sobbed through her testimony, and admitted to misleading Jason in the weeks leading up to the murder. Her words weren't excuses. They were a confession of their own. In the end, the jury delivered its verdict. Jason Whitaker was sentenced to 22 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 14. When the judge read the sentence, Jason nodded once, relieved, almost, as if justice at last had found its balance. In prison, Jason kept mostly to himself. He taught basic engine mechanics to other inmates. He never caused problems. He was quiet, respectful, and observant. Some guards even liked him. He wrote in his journal almost every night, long reflections about love, loss, and regret. But he never once mentioned Kendra's name again. Outside, life moved on. The house was sold. Kendra relocated to Austin and changed her last name. She took up therapy and eventually got a job managing a small boutique downtown. But she never remarried. And every year on the date Ethan died, she disappeared for a few days, always alone, always silent. As for Jason's parents, they visited once. Only once. They left crying and never came back.